Good morning, everyone. How is everybody? You can't hear me. Okay, good. This is our test moment. I'll need to just speak louder. That's what I should do. You know, I think it's pretty hilarious. If you don't know me, I'm Philip Holy. I play in the band sometimes, and I was a professor at Concordia, Texas, for about 2 different times, about 20 years. And now I'm at the UMHB, Go Crew, where I teach a course. I also teach a couple of courses at Southeastern online. Southeastern's in Lakeland, Florida. But yeah, it's kind of funny because at UMHB I teach public speaking. So I'm demonstrating today probably not how not to do it. So when they said, "Do you want to teach public speaking?" I said, "Well, I'm not that good at public speaking, but sure, I'll teach the class." So I'm spreading my method of not speaking well to lots of students out there. No, I'm actually good at it, I think. We'll see. But anyway, you also may know that I curate the film series that that Zion helped sponsor called Faith in Film. We've been doing it at the Palace Theater in downtown Georgetown. The big news is 2 big changes. We're going to be moving it to Film Alley, where the seats are comfortable and they will actually bring food to your chair. You have to order at the concession stand. And so that'll be a nice change to be able to kind of relax a little bit and be comfortable. And the other big change is that we're going to do it monthly, starting in February. We're going to do 4 in the spring on Sunday nights, 6:30, same time as before. And then we'll, if it's successful enough, we'll go ahead and do it in the fall. We've penciled in the reservation for the fall. So I hope you can come. I'm starting to line up movies and speakers, and I can't wait to delve in and see what sort of biblical faith themes that we can uncover in movies out there. There's a lot of things that we need to talk about. Last year we watched the movie Barbie, and I kept telling all the guys, we need to talk about this movie. We seriously do. And we had a nice discussion about it and kind of put it in the context of who we are, creating God's image, what his purpose is for our life, and then compare it to what the movie says. And oftentimes we end up walking out of a discussion like that and said, I really don't like that movie after all. But other times we have a greater appreciation for the filmmaker's craft. So, all right, so we are going to delve into a few unsolved mysteries of the Bible. Some of these really won't be mysteries to you. You probably have come across these and considered these before. But when I read the Bible, sometimes I kind of go, why is that? I'd like to find out more about this. And so I took this opportunity to go not only into the book of John, but a little bit into the other Gospels, do a little bit of research. And I will show you the topics I'm going to deal with today. I wonder if somebody who has a timer on their watch would wave at me at a 1:15, because I want to make sure we have time for discussion. And what I'm going to do is probably go pretty quickly through my slides to just establish my propositions out there for you, and then we can unpack them. I'll try to do that even within a half hour of now, so we'll have plenty of time for discussion. I also have the microphone here, and I would like to see if there's anybody who has a Bible handy or an electronic Bible. When we need a passage read, could look it up quickly and read it. Anybody volunteer? You'll do that? Okay. We just have to tap the bottom of that to turn it on. And I think that'll be helpful because we want to make sure that at least there is some grounding in Scripture to what we discussed today. So let's see if I can hit the right button here now. Well, let's see. I guess I have to figure out how to turn it on. The problem is, if you're like me, they start writing things in such little bitty letters, and I have to. There we go. Okay. Which one's the down one? That one, okay. Since when are you giving me technical advice? I mean,
you look like you're in trouble, sir.
That's all right. Thank you so much for that. I'll give you some theological advice sometime. All right, so if anybody liked this TV series? I loved it. I've watched every single episode. They've got a new one now on Netflix, I believe. And it's always interesting to see the facts that are out there, evidence that you can see. And then they usually leave it open-ended for you to decide for yourself. So what we're going to do is look at these questions today. Hopefully I can get through them all. Now, it turned itself off. There we go. Here we go. Okay. So the thing that always jumped out at me is, why did John call him the disciple whom Jesus loved? Did he not love the other disciples? Well, certainly he did, right? Why is John able to call himself that? As a matter of fact, who exactly were the sons of Zebedee? I will also add to that, where did the gospel writers get their information? We know that Matthew and Mark are likely eyewitnesses to the events in the Bible, but we know that Mark and Luke got their information from other sources. We're going to take a look at that. When were the Gospels written? That's always been a bit of a question in my mind because of what some of the more postmodern scholars say about it. And then finally, did Jesus celebrate the Passover on Holy Week? We call it Maundy, Thursday here, but the Passover was Friday. And so there's questions out there that people have been arguing back and forth, saying, well, did Jesus do something else? Did he not do the Passover? Or if he did the Passover, did he do it wrong? So we'll look at that a little bit as well. So we're going to start with how to approach looking at the Bible today. We are not going to really worry about certainty and truth because I'm not going to propose anything that tells you this is the way it is. These are just conjectures. And I think the reason I'm doing conjecture for you is I think it may add something to your own experience when you look at the Bible. And then you decide for yourself, or you just go to other authorities. What I am going to get at is some things that are likely, or you might say unlikely, plausible or implausible, possible or impossible. And I would say that the bottom three there, or adiaphora, which is the word for it doesn't really matter on your salvation. These are just interesting things that we're going to discuss today. And so I will also often say this is plausible, or this is likely, or it's even possible. So just putting that in context, I'm not making the argument that they're necessarily proven yet in Scripture. And so we can also ask how we, how we know things are true. Big word, epistemology, is really the study of how we come to knowledge of things. And of course, there is authority. And let me just say right now, I am not a biblical scholar. I'm not authority on the Bible. The Bible itself is an authority, though. For our Catholic brothers and sisters, they add the Pope to that. We may ask Pastor Zach or Pastor Kyle or Pastor PK what the Bible means on something, and we may take that as an authority as well, okay? I'm a communication scholar, not a theologian. And so take my authority as very low when it comes to biblical issues. There's tradition out there. Tradition is very important because over the, well, I've even got a little slide here in a minute. Let me just put all these up and then I'll get that slide up here. Tradition is just authority, empirical observation, and logic multiplied by time. So today we may have a scholar out there that says, I've observed this, or I'm reasoning that this happened in the Bible. Well, tradition has not multiplied that to the point that we can really hold that as true. And sometimes what is read in the Bible has been interpreted that way forever. For example, who wrote the book of Mark? I believe it's the book of Mark. Why? Because that was written by somebody named Mark. It wasn't an anonymous source. Or let's say, was John really John the disciple, or was he John the evangelist, somebody later? Well, tradition has it that John the disciple wrote it. And I believe it's true because tradition has underscored that for decades and decades and even centuries. There's empirical evidence. We can read the Bible and get some experience from it. We can observe what the Scripture says. There's logic and reason, and I'm going to float some things out here now that maybe make sense to you. Is another way of knowing. There's revelation, which comes, you wake up one morning and suddenly you just know something. That happens to people sometimes, that truth comes to them unexpectedly from an unexpected, unidentified source. That's not the case in my experience with what I'm presenting today. But I do teach a lot of college students, and many of them, when I ask them to give a speech on something that's good, beautiful, and true, they will go look at their mirror and say, I'm good, I'm beautiful, and my opinions are true. And so that is something that is a bit of a problem in postmodern scholarship out there, is that somebody's opinion suddenly is elevated to be truth. So consider how you know what is true about what you believe in this world, even what you believe in the Bible. All right, so why was John the disciple loved? The one that Jesus loved. It seems like whenever I move, I think the battery may be going dead. Okay, here's some facts we know about John. John contributed 5 books to the Bible, 1 gospel, 3 letters, and a book of prophecy and Revelation. And I'll say this now, Revelation, they say, is one of the youngest books in the Bible, meaning that it was written more recently than some of the others. Some other scholars say the Gospel of John was actually written very late. And so some people say that it may have been John the evangelist and not John the disciple. Again, I don't put much weight on that potential, and I'll show you why in a minute. John wrote his gospel with a rhetorical purpose in mind, so that you may believe. So I would argue that the other gospel writers were more concerned about who, what, where, and when, and John was a little more concerned about the how and the why. Particularly how he starts his gospel is really an explanation of how and why God came to earth and what his purpose on earth was. So it was a rhetorical purpose. All right, the Gospel of John uses the word love 39 times, more than all the other gospel accounts combined. So automatically, this person has got a different perspective, doesn't he? And where's he coming from with that? He was one of the first disciples called by Jesus. We know that from the accounts. And he was a part of the inner circle, usually mentioned with Peter and James. He was the upper echelon. There are some scholars that will divide the 12 disciples into 3 groups. The top 4, the middle 4, and the bottom 4. The bottom 4 we don't know much about. And John was certainly a part of that upper echelon. He was present on the Mount of Transfiguration. Oddly, he doesn't report it in his gospel. But Matthew and Mark do. And who told them? Somebody told them about the Transfiguration. Was it John? Perhaps, but he didn't put it in his account. Maybe because Jesus said, don't tell people yet. Who knows? That's just one of the things that we may not know on this side of heaven. Okay, here's the one that really kind of always made me cock my head and go, what? He reclined against Jesus during the Lord's Supper, okay, the Last Supper. It even uses the word leaned against his breast when he was asking, is it I that will betray you? Isn't that a little odd? It is for me. It just seems odd that the disciples, and of course the pictures that we've seen of the disciples are men, usually my age. They're old guys, right? Why would this disciple cuddle with Jesus at the Last Supper? So we're going to take a look at that. While he was nearby, while Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, he may not have been awake, but he was nearby. And then he hung around during Jesus' trial and crucifixion. I admit that's a bad pun. That was an unintentional pun. It just occurred to me. But he was around, okay? He reported the events. And let's see here. Got a couple more. Come on, baby. It seems like if I turn it off and turn it back on, it works. There we go. He was entrusted to the care of Jesus' mother at the cross and gave himself the title, the disciple whom Jesus loved, no less than 5 times. I got it the first time. He keeps repeating it. He wants you to know this. This disciple who writes this is the one that Jesus loves. So he keeps coming back. Well, what's the reason for that? And how is that even possible? All right, I'm going to skip to another topic here for just a minute. I put up a chart here that is going to be a little hard to read. Oh, wait, I got this one first. All right, let me tell you a little bit about some of what the scholars are saying, where the information, the disciples, how or where they got their information. There's something called the Q source, particularly with Mark and Luke. They relied on what people were saying, the quotations of Jesus that were already around when they finally wrote down the Bible. Okay, so Q source is important, and they say it's different from the sign source that's primarily used by John, which they say the signs and miracles. And so we can look at that and say, well, what are they reporting they have heard or seen would be a little bit different from each gospel. Then there is I just call it the P source. I did not find anybody calling it that. But this would be if Mark got most of his source from the disciple Peter. We could call that the Peter source because he was obviously an eyewitness as well. Mark's gospel, they say, is used by Matthew and Luke as its primary source instead of the other way around. There was a time up until I think last century when they said that Mark got a hold of a copy of Matthew's and got his red pen out and said, no, we don't need that. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to cut that, and shortened it. Does that seem possible? That's very improbable that would happen. Instead, they would have been adding to it. And so that's why I think it's good evidence that Matthew and Mark looked at Mark's account when they created theirs and added necessary detail. M source is also out there. It's one that is also used by Matthew, things that Mark does not have access to. And L source is used by Luke. The account of the nativity is there, and it's quite obvious that the mother of Jesus must have been the witness to that, or Joseph. But she certainly had insights visiting Elizabeth and that sort of thing that no one else would have. And so we considered the L source to be Mary's stories. And of course, I hold this true because tradition holds it true. Matthew and John were eyewitnesses of these events. All right, so my chart is this, and it's going to be hard to see, and I have my laser pointer, but when I show it at the screen, it just disappears, so I'll just have to describe it. What we got at the very top is the year AD, all right? I've started it at year, I can't even read it. It's 30 AD, and the red block there kind of indicates Jesus' time in his ministry, when he started his ministry, okay? That's what that little red. And it goes all the way to, I think, AD 114. The next blue underneath it shows you what is the average lifespan for any adult male who survives the teenage years. I think that's pretty impressive. These days, I wonder if any adult male can survive their teenage years. But the average year would be 54 years in those days. I bring that up because if John wrote the book of Revelation and the Gospel of John, he either had to start very early as a disciple to live that long, or he had to be a very old man when he wrote it. And I think both could be true at the same time. So he obviously lived beyond, I think it's obvious. Is it obvious? It's possible. He lived well beyond what that blue range would have given him. Now, the two yellow ones, so John's age is listed below there. You really can't see it, but it starts at 13. Why 13? Because that's the earliest a rabbi would go select a disciple. They had to be at least 13. And by 17, the Jewish tradition was you should be considered ready to marry. And so it's quite likely that all of the disciples were young men. I've always kind of held that to be true in my way of looking at it. And when you look at the Chosen or other depictions, they tend to be older guys. Now, Peter, we know, was married, so he's probably at least 17, maybe in his 20s because he had been in the fishing business. But it is very likely that the disciples were very young men at that time because that was the tradition. All right, so then, so the yellow represent what some scholars, I kind of picked the worst case scenarios on the date. There are people like me that want to put those earlier. And so they're further down. So you can see that he has a lot of lifespan to get to before he writes it down. The green below that and the pink and the blue are the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. Those are just some estimates. Again, you read somebody, they'll give you a different estimate. And some do put it earlier than what is listed there. And then below that, I've got a red box I get to. The red box is what I'm going to talk about next page. It is when maybe the Q source and those other sources really began to solidify and became exchanged and talked about in church to church and city to city, wherever the Roman roads would take people who wanted to tell the story. And so I have it blocked out there that these disciples and their sources were finding this information within 5 years, and maybe even that's too long, within just a few years of Jesus' ascension. The story was already nailed down very early, and it was consistent. Now, what's last on that is a green box, and that is Paul's ministry. And you can see that Paul, on the road to Damascus, his ministry started only a couple of years after the ascension. Here, the source I found said year 19. I mean, not 19, 35 AD. So that was early on that Paul was out there telling the gospel story. He went to Ananias in Damascus. Ananias already knew the gospel story. He went to Tarsus, and it is assumed that he was tutored there and taught there while he was waiting for his first missionary journey. So the gospel message was already in Tarsus. And elsewhere, we'll see how quickly Christianity spread all over the Roman modern world at that time. And so it is very unlikely that Matthew one day, when he was 70 years old, sat down and said, I remember a guy I used to know who had some amazing stories. I think I'm going to write that down. That's pretty impossible to think of. Of course not. He would have been telling, the eyewitnesses particularly, would have been telling that story from day one. And because so many people were witnesses, they couldn't deviate from the story. That's how oral cultures are. The way the story is told is got to be the same way. Remember the Passover meal? Anybody done the Seder? When the young people read certain things, they cannot deviate from the script. And that's just part of the culture at the time. And so it's quite likely that this gap here to the right of the red box indicates those are potentially the years when they could have actually written down their accounts. And here's a few other things to think about on dating the books of the Bible. How do we know when they date books of the Bible? One way is other world events. So, for example, when Matthew says, hey, the disciples were walking around the temple and saying, look at these stones, and Jesus says, not one of those is going to be on top of standing very long from now. So he was really predicting the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, it would seem if Matthew wrote it after that time, that he would have said, and see, it happened just as Jesus said. Or you should see that temple now. But he didn't. So world events sometimes are a way to kind of triangulate when something was written. Another one is that early church fathers like Ignatius, Polycarp, Clement of Rome, they validate and authenticate So the people, not necessarily the disciples, but early church leaders were already quoting Scripture, the New Testament. They were already quoting what ended up being written down later on. Some scholars argue that you could rebuild most of the New Testament, some say all, the Gospels, you could rebuild them just from what people have quoted. And the letters have been more prevalent for some reason, that we can find these letters a little bit easier than maybe a full gospel account. Here's another one for you. Manuscripts are often dated by looking at the style that it was written. They even talk about the handwriting. So you can tell by the handwriting how old the gospel or this particular artifact is, how old it is. I guess that's possible because, young people don't write in cursive anymore. And my writing is sort of a combination of cursive and print. Yeah. And so could they tell me, could they recognize when I was educated by how I write my handwriting? Possibly. So that is another way they do it. A tiny papyrus fragment of a copy of the Gospel of John is thought to be the oldest manuscript in the New Testament right now, AD 125. That's as early as they can place it. Of course, it's a copy, right? But, you would think that in that chart up there that we'd be finding fragments much earlier than that and have ways of discovering stuff that would be a little closer to when they actually occurred. All right, the Roman wars in Palestine, 66 to 73 AD. I've got it way up in red up there. 70 was when Titus' army came in and destroyed Jerusalem. The red line kind of indicates the end of those wars. Would those wars have any impact on the availability and the existence of old manuscripts? Absolutely. I mean, the whole city was destroyed. So we think that, and you can see that afterwards, as some scholars have begun to date this, they're more confident that they could find stuff afterwards. Well, I'm thinking that there probably were manuscripts much earlier, but the destruction of the entire country was probably responsible for some of those not being around. One scholar says all the books of the New Testament were written within a lifetime of the death of Jesus Christ. In other words, in your lifetime, if you experience and witness these things, you would have written it down before you died. And so going back up to the green box at the top, or the turquoise one, that's some indication. There are scholars out there that say yes, it is very likely that not only was the story already in place, but that other fragments will ultimately, hopefully, be found that can show exactly when these were first written. Does it matter? Maybe not. We know the story, right? And the story we know for certain was told from an early days. What I think is that this thing is not very reliable here. Okay, come on, we'll try again. Try again. It was working so good. There we go. I think Q, whoever or whatever that is, was an eyewitness. So when Mark and Luke and even John and Matthew themselves, they are relying on eyewitness accounts. In other words, there's not somebody beyond Q that was before Q. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not really important. But the disciples, John and Matthew, were certainly eyewitnesses to these events. It's also likely that the Gospels were already accepted, I already said that, long before. I think I'm going to argue that John's oral account was even more impressive, maybe not more important, but more impressive than Matthew's eyewitness account. And there's different reasons. I've already listed some of those above, but I've even got a better reason. Now, this is where I need your help, Larry. If you could go to John 1, and then we'll have 2 verses there. Then chapter 2, 2 verses, 1:11, chapter 20, and 21. Not only was John witnessing these accounts, he was counting. Now, if I were in a court of law and I were asking a witness if they could remember the events, if they could be specific, this was 2 blocks away, not just a little bit away, or this happened on Thursday at 2 p.m., it's going to have more credibility than it said, well, it happened maybe a week ago. So John was counting. So let's hear some of the ways John counted. You got that mic on?
Okay, verse 29. The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world."
Okay, that's John the Baptist he's talking about there. The next day, which makes you say, well, what happened the day before? Right? Go ahead to the next one.
Verse 35. The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples.
It was the next day. So he's counting days, isn't he? All right, let's skip to chapter 2, 1, and then 11.
On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there.
On the 3rd day from what? You'll have to go look at John yourself and figure that one out. But my theory is it's the 3rd day since he started his ministry, when he made a beeline from Bethany on the Jordan where John was baptizing, made a beeline to Capernaum. That was day 1 when he arrived. And this is day 3. He takes a hike up the hill to Cana for that wedding. Okay, verse 11.
Jesus performed this, the first of his signs at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him.
Okay, the first miracle. All right, now some people would say, if you look at Luke, when he called the disciples, the catch of fish happened first. So how would this be true if that was true? There are places in the Bible where John differs in his timeline from the others, and one of those is the catch of fish. When does he put it? When do we have the miraculous catch of fish in John? Anybody remember? It was after the resurrection. It was after the resurrection. Could both be right? Yes, that's plausible. That's possible. I tend to think that John's timeline may be a little more accurate for various reasons. Okay, go to the next one, Larry.
Verse 1 of chapter 20. Early on the 1st day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed.
He's counting. It's the first day of the week, which would be in our time would be Sunday. All right? And then 26.
26 is 8 days later. His disciples were once again inside with the doors locked, and Thomas was there with them.
Not just a week later, it was 8 days later. He was counting, right? And then the last 2? Or was that the last one?
21, we're looking at verse 14
yes.
first. And that says, that this was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead.
Go back in John and count. See if he's right. Was this the 3rd time he appeared?
In verse 17, Jesus asked a 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?"
So you know that John was probably sitting there listening to that conversation. He was counting, wasn't he? So I think that kind of indicates a witness that had an unusual sensitivity to the events that were happening. And so my conclusion that John was extraordinarily privileged because of his status in the inner circle, and he was extraordinarily observant as well. All right, we're going to go to ask the question, did Jesus celebrate the Passover? And a lot of this comes to what John's timeline seems to be a little different from the other disciples on that, because they said the disciples ate the Passover on Thursday. Okay, so on Good Friday, during Jesus' trial before Pilate, long after Jesus' Last Supper on Thursday, how is it possible that the Pharisees told Pilate that they had not yet eaten the Passover? If you still have the Bible, could you look up 18:28? Okay, so the Pharisees were going to Pilate to finish the business with Jesus.
It says, Then they led Jesus away from Caiaphas into the praetorium. By now it was early morning, and the Jews did not enter the praetorium to avoid being defiled and unable to eat the Passover.
So the Pharisees intended to eat the Passover on Passover Day, which is what we call Good Friday. Now, there's some misalignment here, isn't there? And I'm going to point out what that is in just a second. So some people have wondered, was the Passover not really intended to be a Passover? Was it just the Last Supper that Jesus instituted a new covenant? It had nothing to do with the Jewish traditions. I don't buy that. I think it did. And I'm going to go ahead and skip that one right now. So here is the date that I think the most reliable scholars have pinpointed the day of Jesus' death on the cross. Nisan 14 is the month when Jews since Moses' time, celebrated the Passover. It had to do with when the new moon appeared, and then they counted days, and that was the day. And interestingly, in AD 33, we can trace back the calendar and discover that this Passover was one day before a Sabbath. And in the scriptures, there's kind of this configuration of Passover and Sabbath. I think even John kind of makes I won't call it a mistake, but he talked, well, I've got a slide here that says that. First of all, it's always celebrated in the city of Jerusalem. If Jesus had not intended to celebrate the Passover, wouldn't he have done it in Bethany? Mary and Martha's house, there's plenty of room. They would have treated them well. Why did they have to go make arrangements in the city? Because that's what the Jews were supposed to do. Now, some people estimate that with all those people coming to Jerusalem, that they would have had to have sacrificed over 500,000 lambs for all those people. And so that could be something that had to be changed slightly over time just because of the logistics of it. Preparation days is what I was getting at. So there's a preparation day for the Passover, which would have been Thursday, and then the Passover. And Friday, the Passover, was also the preparation day for the Sabbath. Preparation days tend to be more descriptive than prescriptive. There's just when you get your business done so you don't have to do that on the next day. So the Pharisees wanted Jesus crucified on Passover because the rules were less strict than they are on the Sabbath. And they were okay because that was just the preparation day for the Sabbath. Here's the most important thing. We forget this. I think most of us realize this. The day in Jewish times, in Roman times, in the Jewish calendar, started at sunset and ended at the following sunset. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. This is a chart. I know it's going to be hard to see, but the gray boxes represent the day, which another column has sunset to midnight, midnight to sunrise, and then during the day is sunrise to sunset on each day. And you can see how offset our calendar is to that. So actually, if you look at Thursday on the far right, and the disciples said when evening came, they went to the house to have the Passover, it was already Passover, because that's when the day started. So they were actually, technically, celebrating the Lord's Supper as a Passover meal on Passover. And that will show. And my next slide, I think, says that that's what makes it possible, come on, for this thing to change. It is possible that that's how the Pharisees were still able to have the Sabbath. So Jesus and disciples celebrated it on early, and they celebrated it late. That could explain. That is a possibility of how that could both be true at the same time. All right, the Passover lambs. Jewish tradition, I found this multiple times, that the lambs were to be slaughtered in the temple between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Passover. And that's a lot of lambs. And so logistically speaking, They may have, in Jesus' time, had to spread that out a little bit and found other ways to do it. But it was to be roasted and eaten immediately. It wasn't supposed to be kept in the freezer, right? Or the refrigerator like we might do today. Okay, come on. So, there we go. Had Jesus Passover, because the lambs hadn't been slaughtered, and it's just a conjecture here. If the lambs hadn't been slaughtered yet, did Jesus do a Passover without a lamb? He said, take and eat. He wasn't handing them lamb, was he? Is it possible that, oh, wait a minute, there was a lamb at that meal, right? Yes. So it could be. I wouldn't worry when the disciples got their lamb, because they might have even tried it, or he might have had it purposely done just to make the point that I am the lamb at this Passover. Then, so the crucifixion was on Passover, Nisan 14, from the 6th hour, noon, until the 9th hour, which would be 3 p.m. Thus, at the exact moment in the temple when the lambs were being slaughtered, Jesus died. I don't think it's a coincidence. Who could have arranged that timeline to predict when they were going to die? How could it be so perfect? How could it be so meaningful? By the way, where were the lambs raised? Anybody know? You know where Shepherd's Field is? Anybody been to the Holy Land? If you go to Bethlehem, Shepherd's Field's wide open still, like it was back in those days. That's where the lambs were raised. And that has been shown in other sources in the Bible. That's where the lambs were raised for the Passover. Isn't that interesting? Where was Jesus born? Bethlehem. Coincidence? I think not. In Aramaic, now this is my friend Mitri Rahib, who's the pastor of Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. He says that Bethlehem has two meanings. In Arabic, it is house of the flesh, house of the body. In Hebrew, it's house of the bread. Isn't that interesting? Talk about consubstantiation. So when Jesus at the Last Supper said, take, eat, this is my body, he was holding a piece of bread. He was giving them his body. And I just think that is just so amazing. It just kind of sends chills up and down my spine when I come to those revelations. So the last thing, I know I'm running a little late here, but I think we'll have time for some discussion. Who were the sons of Zebedee? Okay, come on. There's just a lag in it, I think. All right, so Zebedee was a successful fisherman in Bethsaida or perhaps Capernaum. They're not sure where. Scholars are on both sides. But I printed out a Google satellite. If you've been to the Sea of Galilee, you'll have to know that the water level right now is about 20 feet higher than it was during Jesus' time. And I don't have my laser pointer, but down here in the lower left is the even coastline right down from Capernaum. It's a slight walk downhill. But up here is where the Jordan comes into the Sea of Galilee, and some people think that Bethsaida was probably more in that direction. And they have one archaeological site that has uncovered fishing instruments, that sort of thing. Well, if you look at the riverbed in green up there, 20 feet lower would have put that it could be that could have been a port, just because the way the river comes in, it would be a safe harbor. So I wouldn't be surprised if the sons of Zebedee grew up in Bethsaida, and Peter ended up in Capernaum. We don't know where they were living at the time of the Bible exactly, but they were his partners, so it's likely that Peter, Andrew, James, and John knew each other from early dates. That's a probable, it's likely, okay? It's likely. The cities are not that far apart. They were in the same business, okay? So that group of four was well known to each other. And we know that's probably why John and Peter were a little competitive. Maybe John, a little younger than Peter, had to prove his worth by saying, I can run faster than you. I've always been able to run faster than you, and I beat you to the tomb. Why would he put that in there? He's a little competitive. And then Peter, and the last part of John, is telling Peter what his death is going to be. And then Peter says, well, what about him? Is he going to get a better deal than me? And Jesus says, that's none of your business. So there's a little bit of competition we could see in that. And likely because they knew each other well even before they were disciples. All right, so who was at the cross on Good Friday? This will help us really put a bow on who the sons of Zebedee were. Again, this is plausible, not certain. But as I look at it from the 3 different accounts, and I've added Mark's account from the next day, these are the women who were at the crucifixion. I'm going to go to my chart right away. I put the other one from Mark just to confirm that's what he'd said. All right, so here's a chart. And John says his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas or Alphaeus. I found out that Alphaeus and Clopas were sometimes used interchangeably as a name. And then Mary Magdalene. Matthew says Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Younger, which is Alphaeus. Alphaeus is the father of James the Younger. And Joses, which was also a name for Joseph. And then the mother of the sons of Zebedee. That's what Matthew says. And Mark says Mary Magdalene again. Mary the mother of James the Younger. Actually, Matthew actually calls him the younger. Mark calls him the younger. Matthew doesn't. That was a mistake I made there. And then Salome. So I started thinking, well, if we can match Mary Magdalene up on all 3 accounts, I wonder if we could do that with the others. So we got Mary Magdalene, the mother of Jesus. I put on there that is assumed, the others may have assumed that she was there. But there is some discussion that Mary had other sons, and one was named James, we know that, and the other may have been named Joseph or Joseph. So it's a little potential that these 2 at the bottom could be talking about his mother, but I don't think it's very important. I think the wife of Clopas is enough because we know Alphaeus was the son of James the Younger. And so what's missing? Whoops, why did it go to another? So there it is. His mother's sister, the mother of the sons of Zebedee, and Salome, I should say. So it's likely, I'd say it's plausible. My first conclusion, if that were true, Salome was Jesus' aunt, and Uncle Zeb, Thunder, was his uncle, if that's true. I'm just telling you what the Bible says, and I've made other conclusions in my reasoning, so you can decide for yourself. Second conclusion, if Salome is Jesus' aunt, then James and John are Jesus' first cousins. Anybody have a little first cousin, a guy that just makes you smile the minute they walk into the room, that you just love, you wrestle with, you poke at him a little bit, but you just admire him growing up, what he's developing to be? Possible. It's possible that's the relationship that Jesus may have had with his first cousins. And because it was proximity where Jesus was living in Capernaum, that it's likely that he knew of them, if not that he knew them well. So I think it's very likely he knew of them, and it's plausible that he knew them well long before he called them as disciples. So what does all this come down to? It could explain why Jesus and John were in Jesus' inner circles, his circle. How James and John could have dared to ask to be on Jesus' right hand in his kingdom. And it explains why that wasn't good enough for the mother. She had to come and ask him that. That could explain why. It wasn't just being impetuous. This is my nephew. I have the right to ask him this. It's possible. It's possible. Why Jesus appointed John to care for his mother. It wasn't just because John was the only male in sight of the cross. It's because he was going to care for Aunt Mary. So it was a natural that he would have picked him to care for Mary. And why John called himself the one Jesus loved, I think that's kind of evident. And why he could lean up against him at the Last Supper. Or remember, he might have only been 17 years old, 16 maybe. No, that would have been 17 at that point. You know, he was a young man, and he loved Jesus for the same reasons we love him, but even more, he loved him because he knew him. And why John's gospel continues to reveal a special perspective of who Jesus is and how the events of his ministry are connected. I think I have one more slide, don't I? Yes, I do. Anyway, I have a source if you're interested in reading up on it a little bit more. I was going to put that up there. Yeah. They invite another look. I think next time you pick up the book of John, keep these possible things, these maybe plausible things in mind when you read it. And I would propose that would be a new and rich perspective. So now, I've gone through this all. We have 10 minutes left. Thoughts, comments? Am I crazy? Yes, I am crazy. You see what I mean by reason and logic? That you can use the Bible in that way. Look at it. Yes, ma'am. Where's the mic?
So one thing that came to mind is, I'm not certain that John was necessarily trying to point out that Jesus loved him more necessarily than other people, but maybe he understood Jesus' love for him more than others understood his love for them, and he wanted other people to understand that Jesus loved them just as much as Jesus loved him.
Yeah.
And that's why his gospel is so different from other people's.
Yeah, like I said, 39 times he mentions love. And of course, there's other people that Jesus loved. He loved the rich man. Remember the young rich ruler? He loved him. So there are other places. But yes, it is unusual. And it's special, I would say, that he really focuses the reader on love. Another thought. If you don't talk, I'm talking another 10 minutes. No. No. What do you think, Ron? It's always hard for a discussion to really get going when nobody wants to discuss. So.
Well, something I thought of, not to do with John, but when you were talking about the eyewitness accounts of the Bible, there's a saying by Pastor Vodi Bakum on why he believes the Bible. I choose to believe the Bible because it is a reliable collection of historical documents written by eyewitnesses during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses, reporting supernatural events that took place in fulfillment of specific prophecies and claimed their writings divine and not of human origins.
For example, how many of you believe that Hannibal brought elephants across the Alps? Okay? Where do we get that information? From a historian who's not as reliable as the Bible. The Bible is extraordinarily reliable when it comes to history. As my friend Paul Meyer was a vice president of Synod, and I think he's still alive. Isn't he alive? He's a professor at Western Michigan, and he says that the Bible is the Christianity is the only religion that you can verify with history, geography, and archaeology. They keep proving what the Bible says is true. It happened. Now, will you ever be able to prove that Hannibal brought elephants over the Alps? I don't know. Anybody read any of Paul Meyer's stuff? You have? Any thoughts on his works?
It's interesting. I think Redeemer would have him come several times.
You've heard him speak at Redeemer, yeah. Yeah. He's a fascinating guy. We once we vacationed at Camp Arcadia. It was the original Lutheran Walther League camp up in Michigan. And Paul Meyer liked to vacation there, and they always had a talent show. And he would always write these elaborate skits, okay? So he's sitting on the porch of the inn there overlooking beautiful Lake Michigan, and he's busy writing. And I said, so I want to talk to Paul, but he looks like he's writing his next novel, okay? Like The Flames of Rome is one of my favorites. If you want a good fictional novel, he's really good. So I thought, he's out there. Well, I asked him later, I said, so what were you working on? He says, I'm working on the skit. So he was a prolific writer. So I bet you had some fun with Paul Meyer.
Yes, quite a bit. Actually, his movie, or his book, Skeletons in God's Closet,
Yeah,
is underway in the process of being turned into
Good.
a movie. He was not, last time I talked with him, he was not happy with the script that the people that are going to produce it have written. So he was wrestling with them, trying to get them straightened
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, basically that novel is, what if somebody discovered an ossuary that was Jesus of Nazareth bones, and they open it up and say, okay, here's Jesus. What would happen to Christianity? And he brings up a very fascinating point. What do you need to believe? What do you have to have that kind of faith? So, Paul Meyer is 94. Yes. He's a fun guy. So, and he's a much better public speaker than I am. So, anybody want the last word? I always like to give somebody else the last word. If not, can I have a volunteer to pray us out of here? Pray that what we've looked at today is strengthening of our faith, not a distraction from it, and that maybe the next coming weeks be something that we can survive well as our country goes through what it's going through. Anybody want to lead us? Okay, Jerry, thank you so much.
Dear God, Father, Son, and Spirit, our knowledge of what happened 2,000 years ago, in some respects, is quite limited and full of conjecture. And yet, at the end of the day, the truth has been spoken that Jesus is the Son of God, who lived, who died, who rose again from the grave, that we might continue to have hope and assurance, not only for this life, but also for the life which is to come. Thank you for giving to humanity the pages of Holy Scripture through your divine inspiration, which used human beings, their experiences, whatever sources they might have used to convey those truths. Jesus, the Son of God and Savior of the world. We thank you for his presence in our lives today and throughout eternity. And we pray this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Yes, thank you.